What's going on, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Today we got a fun episode for you if you are studying for the PE exam. We want to dive into all the exam test-taking strategies we can think of to help you prepare to take the Civil PE exam. So I came up with an awesome list for you. I've got my brother joining me as well, Mark, and we discuss all of the exam and test-taking strategies as you prepare for the Civil PE exam. It's a good one. I think you're gonna like it. Hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July, as I have, minus the water heater blowing up on me. Stuff happens, but it's gonna be a good one. Anyway, hope you had a good time. I know I did as well. Speaking of the PE guys, if you guys need any additional resource or help, feel free to email me, isaac@civilengineeringacademy.com. Or if you need, exams or other material, go check out civilengineeringacademy.com. We even have a full review course for you if you want it at civilpereviewcourse.com. Go take advantage of that. It's all built to help you. But I think you'll enjoy this episode as we discuss these strategies. I know I learned something as I prepared it, and I think you'll learn something if you are preparing for the PE as well. And that is all coming right up. All right, what's up, everybody? So today I got Mark back on with me, and we are.
Hey guys.
Hey, what's up? And today we're going to talk about some awesome PE exam strategies as you're preparing for the PE exam. So I think between the two of us, we could share some wisdom.
We ought to be able to do something. Yeah.
Cool. So just to start this out, I just want to recap, I guess, a little bit about the PE exam, and that is a few statistics. So typically in a year, there's about 15,000 test takers that go through and take this exam. Quite a bit. Maybe it's less than you think it is. Maybe it's more. I don't know. But anyway, there's about 15,000 test takers. I would say on average, if you look at all the pass rates, it usually bounces between as low as like 58% up to 68%. And so I would say on average you're about 65% passing the first time you take the exam. So there's a total of 80 questions. They're all worth the same point value. So it doesn't matter if it's an easy question, it doesn't matter if it's a hard question. You need to get an answer on everything, because
they're not weighted differently, huh?
Yeah, they're all the same.
All the same.
And then, historically, typically you need about 56 points. So 56 out of 80, which is going to give you about a 70% to pass. Now, there's some statistical modeling they might do. They might throw out a problem. They might say you only need 54 to pass, but those are things we don't, typically know about. So on average, I think you need about a 70% or 56 to pass this exam. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's the stats I've always heard.
Cool. And then typically for the hours you need to put into studying for this, you need to put in anywhere between 12 and 20 hours a week. And, we always refer people to study 20 hours. This ends up becoming for you basically a part-time job. If you can put 15 to 20 hours in there, then I think you're giving yourself the best possible chance. So what does that equate to? That equates to doing problems like during the week. That also means you're doing studying on the weekends.
Weekend studying.
Yeah. Not fun, but you got to do it.
You got to do it. In fact, that's reminding me of my regimen when I was studying, and I blocked out a couple hours every night plus weekends. So
yeah. And just a tip, I think some employers, if this is a goal for you, it's also a goal for them, because the value of typical employees is you getting your license. Some of them are willing to work with you and allowing you to do a little bit of studying there sometimes, as long as your job is caught up or whatnot.
That's true.
Is that true?
Yeah, I had that opportunity as well. Plus, my employer paid for any of my reference materials and the cost of the test and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So,
I was the same way. They paid for a lot of reference material. They paid for my exam. So these, employers want you to get this. So take advantage of that and make sure you're putting in the time to get this, because it's going to be a value to them and to you. So, Mark, what about let's take a look at the spec of the breath problems, how
yeah,
they're broken down.
it's kind of interesting how they break these down, but 30% are construction problems. So, for better for worse, the majority of the breath problems come from the construction topic. We get 25% from the geotechnical area of civil engineering, 20% structural, which I personally like, 7.5% from transportation, and 17.5% is both water resources and environmental grouped together. But why is there so much? Why is construction so heavily weighted here, Isaac? We've got. Is that because it's a little tougher than everything else, and they want?
Well, well, as you know, I think these specs change every 6 years or so when they reevaluate them. And in the past, it's been that I think water resources and environmental had their own categories. They were separated.
Yeah, they were.
And then they revisited that and they realized, oh man, I guess civil engineers actually do a lot of construction. And so
That is true.
they
I'm one of them.
So they revamped it, and now you've got 30%. So the majority of your questions for the breadth exam come from construction type problems. So I think that's where the emphasis is for civil engineering. Not that I think water resource or environmental is like been diminished at all. It's still a good chunk of the exam.
So
But
you think it's essentially then they're looking at the population of civil engineers and what are they all emphasizing, or where what industries are they working in, and they're proportioning things based on that.
I think so. And I
Okay.
think they listen to academia, when they do their polling and they find out where people are working. And I
Okay.
think they adjust these exams based on that.
Okay.
They
That makes
do.
sense.
Now, the problem with that, though, is, if you look at the depth exam pass rates for construction, they have the worst pass rates. So you get the most problems in the morning, but you get the worst pass rates for the afternoon. So maybe there's a red flag there we might want to talk about.
Well, yeah, and that's interesting because I can see construction being that's obviously where I work, and I can see it pulling in geotechnical, structural, transportation. I mean, it pulls in from every one of the disciplines within civil engineering. Maybe that's why it's so tough.
I think so. I think people think it's going to be the easiest topic, and then they end up getting slapped in the face because they realize there's a lot of stuff here. It's usually more wordy than the other depth exams.
Yeah.
Not that there's like tricky stuff there, but more wordy problems make it a little more difficult to comprehend what
Right.
they're asking for, all that jazz. So
Yeah.
anyway, so how do we, speaking of depth exams, let's talk about how we select a depth exam that we wanted to take. So what do you think about this?
Well, I like looking at what you're doing is probably your first consideration. If you're an engineer that's working in the structural arena, then maybe that's the direction you want to go, because that's what you're familiar with. You're being exposed to that every day. You're working those types of problems, and maybe that's the direction you want to go. And the same thing happens if you're a transportation engineer. Um, that's what you're familiar with. So it just stands to reason that that would be the direction you want to go, because
Yeah, I would say
you're working
whatever's
it.
going to help you further your career is probably the one you want to go with. And if you're doing it, then all the better. So
Yeah, perfect. You're starting to get a handle on your material already, and so why not head in that direction?
cool. So let's further dive into this. So another question we should probably be asking ourselves if you're thinking about depth exams is what kind of topics are you going to be handling, what kind of diversity of problems you're going to be dealing with. And I think the question here goes along with one of our other points, is really how much kind of support material do you have that it ties in with your depth exam. If you look at the Civil Engineering Reference Manual, which is a massive manual, got some back here. If you look into each of those topics, you can see that like the structural depth exam provides a ton of support material in the SERM. Water resource is a huge chunk of the SERM. Transportation's pretty good size, so you get a lot of support in those topics. Geotech is not as much, but there's also not as, maybe you don't need as much there. And then construction, there's very little construction support, but like Mark said, I think you hit a ton of topics within all of those. So
Yeah.
It's helpful to know what kind of material you have at your fingertips to help support you. So.
Yeah, no, that's all good stuff. It's just, what about Isaac? What if you have a group of individuals that you are working with? Maybe you've got several other, I'll call them colleagues, that are trying to get the PE as well. Would it make sense to get with those individuals and have them be your
Sure.
study buddies?
Yeah, if you run it, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Especially if you're, heading into the same topic for your depth exam.
Yeah,
Might
for
make
sure.
sense to do some of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great idea. If you can gather with other people, especially at your own workplace, that makes it really convenient.
Yeah, and that's helpful when you're somebody that's motivated by that group dynamic. I don't know. I was motivated that way, at least in my school career.
Yeah, and there's ways of getting with other people. I know, your local ASCE sometimes have like a student chapter or something. You can get with people there. So there's ways of finding groups. Perhaps you can even join our private, or not a private, but our Facebook group for Civil Engineering Academy, ceacommunity.com. Go join them.
Absolutely.
We'll get you in there, and there'll be some PE test takers. Another question you want to think about when you're selecting your depth exam is the standards that go along with these, and if you are actually familiar with them. So I want to kind of just break this down, but if you look at the water resources, you actually have 0 references for water resources, and it does have a lot of support material in the SERM. So maybe that's if you're questioning which depth exam you're taking, that might be one you want to look at. And if you actually look at the pass rates, historically, water resource has a pretty good pass rate, probably more than average.
Yeah, that might be why, huh?
Yeah. The other one is, looking at construction, that requires 9 references. There's little support in the SERM, or it's scattered all over the place, So, that one can be tricky. Structural, I say if you're working structural, you're in it and you should know the references. There's 10 references that you need for that one. And there's tons of Civil Engineering Reference Manual support. In fact, they've built a whole separate manual for structural engineers. So there's a ton of structural support
for
those. And then you got Transpo, which has the most references. That's 11 references. There is good support material in the Civil Engineering Reference Manual for that as well. And I know a lot of people do take transportation, and a lot of these references, most transportation engineers, I believe, are very familiar with them. So even though there is a lot, they have them.
They know all those AASHTO standards and references, and there's a lot of them, but they know how to get through them.
Yep. And then lastly is Geotech, which I believe just has 2 references now. It used to be 0, but I think it does have 2 now that they list. So, there's not a lot there. I think if you know what a factored load is, because they list ASCE 7 now. But if you know what 1.2 dead and 1.6 live is, then I think you're covered for the Geotech. Speaking of the SERM, though, if you do need the SERM, go use our code and website, civilengineeringacademy.com/PPI. It will take you to PPI's website, and you can use our discount code of CIVAC and get 15% off any book you get there. So the SERM's a great book. It's kind of the go-to resource for studying this stuff. And if you don't have it, then go get it.
Yeah.
Mark, let's talk about during the exam. What are we going to do here?
Okay, so here we're going to talk a little bit about the strategy. Once you're into the exam, what do we do? The big one is working the problems as they come. So just take them one at a time as they're presented to you. If it's something that you're a little nervous about, you haven't seen it before, then skip it. Don't let that compromise your general progress on the test. Just take those problems as they come. If you can't handle it right at that moment. And a lot of times I've been in situations where I've taken tests when I get a first look at a problem, makes me a little nervous. I'm like, oh man, how am I going to tackle that? But as you go through the material on the test, it kind of gets the juices flowing and jogs your memory, and you can go back and handle those ones that you've skipped probably a little better.
Perfect.
Yeah. You want to talk about the second one here, Isaac?
Yeah, so I think an important part of going through this is when you're going through the exam, you're going to take it as it comes to you. If you don't recognize it, skip it. But naturally, what you're doing is when you're looking at the first, say, problem number one, you quickly in your mind, you're already categorizing the problem. You're already thinking about where you saw it, what category it fits into, and what they're trying to ask you. So, if it's a transportation horizontal curve problem, you've automatically categorized it to figure out in your mind what you need to do to solve that problem. And that comes with practice. That's really what you're doing, practicing problems so you can quickly categorize what they're asking you.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And then when you've done that, you know where to look things up quickly in the SERM and find that reference material that you need, right?
For sure.
And one of the ways that you can utilize the SERM is to get familiar with the index that's there so you can quickly reference topics. I actually had, I was just, remembering back when I took the PE, my wife actually helped me with a custom index, and she's a really fast typer, and she's really good at organizing things. And so she put those two skills together to help me out on just creating like this massive comprehensive index that I could look up any keyword in that sucker, and it would immediately reference me to the right location in the SERM, and I could access information really quickly. And it worked great. It was a great resource.
Well, I wish we all had a wife like that. Just kidding.
I know, I'm lucky. She's awesome.
Yeah, I used the index quite a bit, and where that came into play with me was really on the theory questions. I'd pick out that one key term they were talking about, and because theory, you'd either need to go look it up or do a quick refresh on it. So the index came in handy for me on that. But I think in general, most students, if you're studying for this, you're going to be tabbing up the SERM quite heavily with general topics. I mean, my tip for that would be kind of to color code each section. Maybe water resources is, blue and transportation's yellow, or whatever you want to do. But you're going to tab this sucker up. It's going to look crazy, but you're going to have it. You'll be well familiar with the book.
Yeah. And that's I got into that. I had just a mess of tabs, and that's actually what prompted my wife to do that custom index for me. I was overly tabbed. I was getting nuts.
Yeah, I took a picture of my book, and I've seen it floating around on the internet. It's being used, but yeah, it's tabbed like crazy. Everybody does that, so it's good.
Yeah.
Speaking of a good reference, we actually do have created what's called the Ultimate Equation Reference Guide, and I've gone in and pulled out the most common equations that people have used in the SERM, put it in a nice little guide for you. If that's something you're interested in, go find it at our website, civilengineeringacademy.com. And you can even use our discount code to get $5 off. It's called Discount 5Me. That's the number 5. Discount 5Me. Get $5 off of that. But a lot of people have liked that equation reference guide as a quick reference, so they don't have to thumb through the entire SERM. It's just right there in front of you. So anyway, check that out.
Yep.
So we're going to take basically 3 passes at this exam. We're going to make sure nothing is blank. I would suggest that it's okay to guess on some of these problems as you're going through the exam. You can mark that problem if you do have a question and want to come back to it, but I would not recommend stress guessing. And that means, we've got 5 minutes left on the exam. I've got 10 more problems to do, and I'm just slapping everything on B or whatever. You've just kind of shot yourself a little bit by not even looking at those problems. And I don't think you want to do that. So, there is a little bit of a strategy to guessing, but let's talk about these little numbers.
Stress guessing doesn't, you shouldn't be into that situation until, I would say, like the very last minutes of the test, where just in the effort of not leaving anything blank. That's the only stress guessing you should ever be doing, right?
Stress guess. Yes. So what about these? We pulled some of these numbers from the NCS practice exams.
Yeah, this is interesting as we're talking about guessing. They've kind of broken down, NCES has broken down the percentage of answer A, B, C, and D's that are offered on any particular question, and the percentages are interesting. So if we've got on the depth exam, right, Isaac? Because we've got these
comprised of all the depth exams. How many A's, how many B's were there, how many C's were there, how many D's were there as an option. This is to help you realize like what the best multiple choice selection might be if you were to break all of these down.
Yeah, and so there was 52 A's, 62 B's, 75 C's, and 51 D's were the correct answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of the, C was the correct answer for the majority of the questions, 75 of them. And so just kind of interesting that in a real testing situation, maybe C is the one you should guess, especially if you're stress guessing at the very, very end. Your probability of getting the right answer is probably right there on answer C.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be an indication of the real exam, but it could be.
Yeah.
But I do think in general, though, our recommendation is to stick with one letter if you are going to guess.
Yeah. So if you're guessing and C is the one that you've picked beforehand, just stick with that one every time. If you guess the same letter every time, again, your probability of getting the right answer is increased. So,
but hopefully you're not guessing on too many.
No.
Hopefully.
No.
Okay, so as part of this, let's talk a little bit about units on the exam. I think this is kind of interesting because on the AM portion of the exam, they tell you that they are going to test you on both SI and US units that will be used. So be prepared for that. But what about the PM exam?
Well, the PM has primarily your US customary units, right? Or your US units, I think are the primary focus there, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And that's probably driven from not only academia, but what real life practice currently in the United States. We're still using those US customary units. That's what everybody's comfortable with. That's what I'm comfortable with, despite the fact that, SI units fundamentally are obviously easier to use on a theoretical level or a fundamental level. But here in the United States, that's just what everybody's used to. And so I think that's probably how that's getting driven. What you say, Isaac?
Yeah. I agree. I think what's interesting about the NCES, though, is that they specifically list that the structural depth exam uses the US units. But if you go look at the rest of the depth exams, they don't tell you. And
Ah,
so everyone's like, well, what units are they going to ask me? What are they going to do? And
right.
so I think you're right, though. They will test you more on US units for your depth exams. And I also think what's interesting is that, if you go back to the FE, typically your units have been SI units that they tested you on for the FE. So it
Right.
actually flips the script. So you got used to the SI stuff in school, and now you're in practice. We're going to test you on using US units mainly.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
that's kind of the units question. Let's jump into, let's say we're all ready. We've practiced our problems. We're getting ready for exam day. How are we organizing now all of our resources?
Well, the 800-pound gorilla, the big one is the SERM, of course. That's kind of your outline. It's like your template to help organizing all the subject matter and frankly your studying efforts, right, Isaac? It's like the
Yeah,
outline.
that's kind of what you're going to use. There has been more competition I've noticing coming. School of PE actually has a book that I've talked to, and looked at, and um, they're actually creating a depth book as well. So you've got, there's more competition out there, more resources, but the SERM has always kind of been the go-to resource. If anybody was interested in looking at the School of PE's manuals as well, you can go to civilengineeringacademy.com/SOPE to go check out theirs, but they do have a breadth book. But yeah, the SERM's the gorilla. That's the one you're going to be studying from.
Yeah, and as things change to computer-based testing, right? For when is it? 2023, when everything.
2023, we're switching over.
Yeah, where there's actually going to be something similar to the FE reference handbook, but it's going to be the PE reference handbook, right? And ultimately, that will be the only reference material you'll ever be able to use, which throws in another little dynamic here, because it'll be interesting to see how the SERM changes, maybe to match the PE reference handbook, or maybe like you're saying, maybe there'll be other competitors that I don't know, structure a better study resource that'll kind of conform to that new standard. I don't know.
Yeah, I
It'd
mean,
be,
if you want to talk about the future, as we go computer based, there will be a PE reference handbook, and it will be a closed book exam, except for that.
yep,
So your go-to resource will be that book that you'll want to reference equations from, but also you need to practice problems. And I think the SERM still provides you a great reference, for work as well. It's a good book to have just in your office place.
absolutely.
But the SERM could edit their book to reference equations from their manual, and I don't see why they couldn't reference where it is in the handbook for people as well. But
Right. It'll just
things
be
will adapt.
interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the future.
hmm So first we're going to organize that SERM, make sure it's tabbed, make sure you're very familiar with it, and then you've studied a ton of problems. So what's the best way to organize all these problems you've now got?
Well, to organize the problems,
Yeah, you're just
I
throwing them in a binder.
oh, I mean, I've so you want them for like reference as you're actually going through the test and going back and saying, "Hey, I worked that problem before.
Yeah.
Let's see what I did." Yeah, I mean, a binder is a great idea. I I'm kind of confessing some things here, but I wasn't that organized, and I probably should have been. I really leaned on the SERM quite a bit for my practice problems, and because when I went through and studied, I mean, I'm looking at the SERM and I'm studying all the examples, I'm doing all the practice problems, and so that was kind of my notebook for my practice problems. But
Cool.
But it's a great idea to, if you're kind of manually working things on the side, work those problems. But if the SERM is going to be your main reference material during the text, just make sure that you can quickly access your written problems that you've done, by hand, off to the side, so you can make a quick correlation there if you need to, right?
Yeah.
From the
I think
SERM to your practice problem.
I think if you can organize them based on categories, transportation, structural, etc. And when you quickly realize that you've got a problem that you've solved before, some people want to go find a similar problem that they've studied, which is totally fine. But yeah, you just want to have those things organized, and you could even, like Mark said, have the SERM and your practice problems correlate with each other, so you can quickly go back and forth between the two.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
And then you got to have your specs. You got to have your reference manuals for that, which is usually where people bring in their suitcases full of books.
Yeah. So how many books did you bring in, Isaac, when you
Honestly,
took
so
your
I did
PE?
the geotech depth exam, and I didn't bring one reference manual with me because I selected that one at the time. And yeah, it does list 2 specs now, but every question I had that was from OSHA was found in the SERM. Anything that dealt with an ASCE 7 reference was also in the SERM. So I brought 0 reference manuals for me. But if I was doing structural or
Yeah.
construction, yeah,
So
I would bring them.
I did structural, and so I had all my AISC manuals, my ACI manuals, my ASC 7. I had an IBC. What else did I have? I mean, I had about 10 references that I brought in. Didn't there was some people in my group there that they had like milk crates on dollies just full of reference material that they had drug in, but I tried to keep it to a minimum, but I knew that I would need some reference material on the structural depth.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and then lastly, as you organize all those specs, I think you want to bring in, I always recommend this for your specific depth exam. You're going to have specific depth books. So if you're taking water resources, bring a good, hydrology and hydraulics book that you can reference out of. And it, that applies to all the disciplines. So make sure you have a good book that you can bring with you so that you're not getting caught off guard on your depth exam when they throw a theory question that's not in the SERM. So something like that. But that's really it. So those 4 areas, you should be good in organizing your stuff. So
good tips.
Good tips there. And lastly, let's talk about the exam day. I'll just hit the first one here. It's exam day. Make sure you've given yourself plenty of sleep the night before, making sure we're getting in the right.
Yeah. What did you do the night
hours
before the test, Isaac? What did you do?
Oh man. So I think a night or 2 before, like I just turned off the study mode. I didn't want to study any more problems. If you don't know it by then, you don't know it, and you need to give your mind a break.
Right.
So that's my thoughts there. So I don't know. What did you do?
I did the same thing. I was at the point where I was just, what, if I don't know it, I don't know it. I've got to get my mind kind of off of it, just at least for that night, and try to, I don't know, think about something else, just so I can get some sleep. I wouldn't recommend, taking some sleeping pills or something the night before, saying, "Oh, I got to get a good sleep. I better take something," because you'll be
some Ambien.
Yeah, you'll be groggy and kind of lethargic in the morning. But you got to allow yourself to get some good rest the night before.
I guess we should say try to get good sleep, because your mind's going to be busy. As you go into the exam, though, the next thing I want to talk about is just kind of understanding where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. You know, if you're taking transportation depth, you should be able to knock out every breadth transportation question that's thrown at you. And if your weakness is geotech, then, you know, you understand that. So when you see a problem that comes up that you suck at, let's, you know, make sure you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. You're not going to know everything. That's just, you can't.
You're not?
Yeah, you have to admit that as an engineer.
I thought you knew everything, Isaac.
You will not know everything.
Yeah.
And like we said, get through the exam, just as we mentioned, go through those passes, get through it. That's just part of it. You know, you're going to be nervous. Let your nerves calm down. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's in the same struggle. Some have taken it. This is their first time. Some, this is their 8th time. And people are all over the place. So, you know, calm down. We'll get through it.
Yeah.
Let go of the difficult problems that you really suck at. So if you are stuck on a problem, just let it go, man.
And don't let it be a point of getting of letting you know, get discouraged. It's like I personally have the tendency to do that, like, oh man, I don't know that one. You know, there's something wrong with me. What's going on? Don't think like that. Just let it go. You can't know everything, like Isaac said. Just let it go and move on. Get to the ones that you can tackle.
Yep. And that goes along with just don't get stuck. Keep moving forward. Don't get stuck. You got to get through the exam. Okay. Work hard. Use the time they give you to work the problems. You know, you'll see some people that finish super quickly and whatever, you know, good for them. Most people aren't like that. Use the time they give you and work the problems. You know, time is a huge component of this exam. A lot of people get hung up on the time aspect of this. I only got 6 minutes per problem. I got to get through this as quickly as possible. You know, just use the time they give you. Slow down. Take a breath.
Yeah, just work the problems and take, you know, it's going to take as much time as it takes, you know. Use the time that they give you, but just take enough time to, and everybody needs a different amount of time, Isaac, for different types of problems. I mean, nobody works problems at the same speed, right? The same efficiency. And so, but just take the time that you need to get the right answer and just get it, and then work on the rest of them as you go, you know, as they come.
Okay. And then lastly, I think have a great attitude. We've seen people with bad attitudes that have been beaten down by this exam. You know, you can do this. I promise you can do it. If you're a repeat taker, just keep registering for the next one. Don't slack off on your study efforts, and, you know, don't look at that as a reflection of you as a failure. It's just the learning process and jumping through these testing hoops. So you can do it. Have a good attitude.
Amen.
Yeah, we're here to support you. So if any of you guys ever need help with anything, email Mark or myself, mark@civilengineeringacademy.com or isaac@civilengineeringacademy.com. Also, if you need a full review course, we can definitely help you out with that. If you go to civilpereviewcourse.com, go check that out. It comes with lecture modules, practice problems, exams, support, everything that you need to get this thing done and over with. We've helped people that have had to take this 6-7 times. So it's good stuff. Go check it out. And like I said, we're here to help you. So Mark, thanks for joining with me again. Hopefully these helped everybody.
Thank you. It was a good time as usual. Thanks, Isaac.
All righty. We'll see you later.
Yeah.
Bye.